Hello and welcome to today's program, Optimize Your Manufacturing Hands-on Training Using E-Learning. I'd like to introduce our moderator for today, Rob Coolidge. Rob Coolidge is the Director of Business Development and Sales and leads the Government and Education and the Corporate Small Business Sales Team and the Business Development Team. Rob brings with him 15 plus years of experience in training, sales, business development, and operations. Without further ado, I'd like to hand the floor over to Rob.
Great, thanks, Courtney. Hello and welcome to today's session. As Courtney mentioned, brought to you by toolingyou. My name is Rob Coolidge. I'll be the moderator. For years, instructors and manufacturers have been teaching students with the traditional method of classroom-related instruction, then moving into the hands-on in the lab. And we all know it's no secret that students and instructors prefer the hands-on portion of training. Today, we're going to discuss how to provide you, the instructor, with what you and your students want, more time for hands-on learning. So we put together a fantastic panel of instructors who have utilized e-learning in their classroom to optimize their hands-on training by removing the administrative tasks such as writing curriculum, long hours of classroom lectures, grading exams. Our panel of experts will provide you with insights as to how they have been successful with online programming. But first, I want to take a second and just kind of introduce ToolInMe to those of you who've not heard of us or have not used us extensively. We work directly with hundreds of high schools, community and technical colleges, and universities. ToolInMe helps prepare the next generation of workforce by providing flexible e-learning in a way that students today understand delivery, visually, auditory, and interactive. ToolInMe provides instructors with complete curriculums and specified manufacturing competencies. We offer pre-tests, assessments, grading systems, and analysis, something that's going to give them more time to spend mentoring and teaching in the lab, you instructors. So without further ado, I want to introduce our panelists. We've got Bret Holmes from Ogden-Weber Technical College in Ogden, Utah, Kevin Finan from Atlantic Technical College and Broward College, Coconut Creek, Florida, and Troy Spear, Theodore Roosevelt High School in Kent, Ohio. Bret, why don't you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about you and your program.
Thanks, Rob. I'm Bret Holmes. I'm the machinist coordinator here at the Ogden-Weber Technical College. We are about 45 miles north of Salt Lake City. We serve multiple industries. We have medical, aerospace, transportation, recreation, and of course the small machine shops as well. We've been very fortunate. We were able to in 2002, we discovered ToolInMe when it was in its very early stages. We've been able to use ToolInMe. We were implemented in 2004. We had a really tough time getting it implemented to start with, and it's just logistics and payment and computer software and having enough computer labs and all the stuff that goes along to get it started. But we were able to get going in 2004 with our apprenticeship program. We were on a one-year trial basis in 2004, and within 6 months we were able to roll it into our actual program as well. So we have it both in our apprenticeship program and our certificate programs here at the college. In 2010, the college was given the Haas Technical Training Center Award. In 2011, we were given a program-specific commendation from the Council of Occupational Education for our blended learning style, which ToolInMe has been a big part of. And in 2012, we were lucky enough to become the first Utah school to receive the ToolInMe Platinum Education Center. Since our induction with ToolInMe in 2004, we've had over 57,000 hours logged in ToolInMe with our students. They've completed over 66,000 courses completed. Our average pre-test score was 66%. Our average final score is 83%. We've had 81,869 logins, and we have over 1,600 accounts given. And our certificate programs, we have a 900-hour, we have a 1,375, and a 590-hour apprenticeship program. And all of our programs are what they call blended learning. They're able to go at their own pace. They can't go too slow, but they can go as fast as they would like. So students can get through the program as a working student from home, any other place where we have the blended learning. Thanks, Rob.
Awesome. Thanks, Brett. Appreciate that. Kevin, could you please introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your program?
Sure, Rob. I was very lucky, guys. I started my technical training when I was 12. I went to a technical high school, and after the technical high school, I went on to do a 4-year apprenticeship in Germany in tool making and machining. And after that, I worked in industry for around a little over 20 years. And while I was doing that, I went back to school actually and got a degree in math education, which came in useful later on for a lot of different reasons. But it's kind of funny, I've kind of gone right around in a circle. I started in a training machining program at 12, and now at almost 50, I'm teaching it, which is kind of fun from the student's point of view. I had a joke with them. Any mischief they could possibly think about getting up to, I've kind of seen over that length of time. Some of it I probably created when I was 12. One of the one of the problems about technical education that we have, I think everybody's familiar with, is that there's a certain perception that it's less, which of course we know anybody who went through a technical education or is involved in technical education knows that we have to do all the same academic classes that everybody else has to do. Me myself, all those years ago, had to do the same classes my teachers or my sisters did in AP history and math and all that, as do our students, which is very, very useful. The fact that you can combine academics and get a technical education, they're things that go together. There's so many examples of why technical is so useful in relation to, say, a sign bar in machining. It comes from the trig function, obviously. So it's so useful in relation to that. The program here at ATC is a little unusual in that way, in that we have a magnet high school embedded into the college. So the high school students that I get in general are going on to engineering school, and it's anybody who's worked in industry is very familiar with the idea that we have a lot of very clever men and women go through technical classes or 4-year degrees, but because they have no hands-on knowledge, they struggle, and that's one of the great advantages for my high school students, that they have the knowledge of hands-on machining, which is, of course, the only way to learn, is actually to do it. And that's where ToolIngyou is so useful as well, is that there's a language or a jargon that happens on the shop floor that you kind of have to be familiar with. And ToolIngyou is great at that. For anybody who hasn't seen it yet, one of the first things they do is introduce you to different vocabulary, which is very, very useful in relation to that. We also obviously have an adult program. The students are in the same program together. The adults in general, high school guys in general, go to college. The adults in general I get them straight into industry. And but both groups have to cover the same material, obviously: safety, blueprint reading, manual machining, milling, turning, surface grinding, CNC, obviously, Mastercam, and SolidWorks. And of course, again, ToolIngyou is so helpful in relation to that, in that it gives us more time in the shop. And when I started teaching, 6 years ago, I was lucky the teacher that was here before me, Mr. Braz, he did a great job. He had just introduced ToolIngyou a year before, and every time I meet him, I thank him because it has made the program just so much better and so much easier to manage, and I can spend a lot more time in the shop where I want to be, quite honestly, and I think definitely where the students want to be. So it's kind of really cool in relation to that.
Fantastic. Thanks for that, Kevin. Appreciate that. And so, Troy, tell us a little bit about yourself and your program.
Thanks, Rob. So I'm Troy Spear again. I teach in the Theodore Roosevelt High School in the northeast corner of Ohio. And so we are about 40 minutes west of Youngstown, about 45 minutes south of Cleveland, and only about 20 minutes outside of Akron. So kind of a little trifecta going on there with those 3 cities, and that's where Kent is. Kent State is our college campus that's here in town. So Kent, obviously, if you haven't heard of it, is a big college town as well that way. So we're pretty unique here in the fact that Theodore Roosevelt High School is a comprehensive high school that houses or hosts career technical programs as well. So we're part of what's called the 6-District Compact, and there are 5 other school districts locally that all share career technical programs. And so those are housed within the individual high schools. here at Roosevelt, our previous administration saw fit to house as many of those as possible because not only did they value it, but they also saw the advantage for how it worked towards the school and how it worked in advantage for the community as well. So our career technical programs range everything from cosmetology, construction, deco or business, marketing. There's a newer program called Business and Sports Management. And then my program, of course, which is Computer-Aided Design and Engineering Technologies. And we call that CAD and Engineering Tech, or CADET for short. And our whole focus is that we tell students, if you can dream it, we're going to show you how to draw it, design it, prototype it, machine it, put it together, and make it work. So just as you can see there on the screen, we are teaching both manual machining as well as CNC machining. We have both CNC routers, CNC mills and lathes, turning center. To date, we think we're the only high school in the state of Ohio that has a water jet, and we were able to get that locally from a manufacturer called Wardjet, and they're here in Talmadge. And they're one of the local 6-district compact schools as well. So that's a little bit about myself and what I do. Oh, I guess I should also say that I work with juniors in a 2-level program, and we are responsible for marketing through the other 5-district schools to be able to attract and pull those students in through that. So that's a dog and pony show and a 3-ring circus that we get to be a part of every year.
Excellent. Thanks, Troy. Appreciate that. So a few housekeeping items before we jump directly into some questions here. This whole presentation will be available to you on the ToolInMe YouTube channel coming up on Friday. We will also send you out a link to that as well. So I'm going to kind of jump into this thing with the first question. And also one other thing, if you want to ask some questions from the audience, we're going to hold those to the end, and we will circle back to those and ask our panel of experts here to answer those as best they can. All right, so a little bit about myself. As Courtney said, Rob Coolidge. I'm with toolingyou U-SME, been here about 2 years. I'm the Director of Business Development and Sales, and I lead the Government and Education group here. All right, let's dive right into this thing. So I'm going to jump into this thing, and this first question, I'm going to start off with Kevin. So Kevin, tell me a little bit about how have you integrated e-learning into your classroom?
The very first thing we do, guys, very important, like anything technical or anything in academic class, it's very important to start off kind of on the right foot. So the first day and indeed for the first week, we spend a lot of time making sure that the students understand why theory or related theory to machining or manufacturing is so important. So we spend a lot of time explaining that to them. And then after that, obviously, we introduce ToolInMe to the students. The students, in our programs, in the adults, they must purchase it, their account from the bookstore. But of course, for high school students, it would be included. And so what we start doing is we log them into their accounts, make sure that they know how to get in there. In general, we go right through one lesson, starting at the beginning. For us, it's usually Intro to OSHA, and explain to them how to get in, the advantages of it. It's always kind of cool in relation to that, and students begin to see very quickly the advantages. I don't have to carry a textbook. I also show them, obviously, that's the wonderful thing about ToolInMe that has such a wide variety of classes related to manufacturing, is that I obviously assign the students what they have to do for my framework here in Florida. But obviously students, I have wonderful students, they very often want to go above and beyond that. A lot of them are into robotics, which of course ToolInMe has lessons for. So not only do they see that they can work at their own pace, they can stop, they can replay it. Like I said before, I went to technical school, the concept that you can listen and read at the same time, I wish we had that 30 years ago. It's very, very useful. And of course, it's very, very user-friendly. I think that's the first thing that the students realize, which is so important. The other thing, of course, because we have adults as well, though, guys, you have to maybe make sure that you get everybody on board from an online learning perspective. And so the younger, high school kids they kind of love it from day one. and most of the adults do it as well, but you just have to make sure that there's no technical issues with the adults. And so after we go through it, I always encourage them to email me and talk to me, obviously, and email me. Sometimes they're more comfortable emailing the first week until they get to know me. And of course then, probably the second or third day, I sit down with them individually and make sure that they understand how to use ToolInMe. The fact that you can take notes, obviously, in ToolInMe is another wonderful advantage in relation to that. So it really does work. It really, from a teacher's point of view, it makes administration an awful lot more easy. But more importantly than that, the students, you see the progress when you bring them out into the shop and they've done the lesson on whatever aspect of machining it was in ToolInMe, they're further ahead. And so because of that, you can actually be a lot more efficient in the shop. And that's why it's just really been a blessing having ToolInMe over the last 6 years teaching.
Excellent. Thanks, Kevin. Appreciate that. I'm going to move on to Troy here. Troy, could you kind of give us your sense of that question?
Absolutely. So how I am able to integrate ToolInMe is with my students from the totals of 6 schools, like I mentioned earlier. I use ToolInMe as a additional type of textbook. We don't currently have textbooks. We haven't been able to find one that was going to fit our bill for what we're doing. And so ToolInMe, we were able to find out, said, yeah, okay, this is going to work for what we're doing, for what our industrial partner base looks for and is actually using themselves. So that was one of the things that I was most excited about with ToolInMe when I started digging into it, was finding out just how broad it was. Just like Kevin alluded to, it covers a lot of information. Anything you can think of that would be in the manufacturing realm, it's in there. And so with that, I was really excited about it, and then being able to communicate that excitement, being able to communicate that passion, if you will, to my students, it's kind of fun. As Kevin alluded to also, it's hands-on, and that's why students are here in my program, is because they want to be more hands-on. They are more of a hands-on type of learner. And so having them being able to integrate the curriculum that I assign straight from the computer screen to a machine, or even doing it as like a front load type of application where it's like, okay, instead of, go home and read these 3 chapters, it's like, okay, go ahead and take time and do ToolInMe on this class, and then be able to jump into a demonstration or a lecture the next day or that day and have students have that front-loaded information. So they see my connection to it, and they see the importance of it and being able to kind of follow through with that.
Thanks, Troy. Appreciate that. Brett, let's take it from your perspective as well. Thank you.
Sorry, can you hear me now?
That's okay. Yes, we can. Thank you.
Sorry, I'm doing a commercial too. Cell phones. Can you hear me now? Sorry.
Yes, sir.
What we really like about ToolInMe is we have the ability to teach multiple level students at all times. Where we're an open entry, open exit system, where we're not overseeing a classroom lab type environment, we have all of it at the same. So I have a student, I could start a brand new student tomorrow versus a guy that's doing CNC programming and answering the same question within 5 or 6 minutes of each other. So in a blended learning style, we like the fact that it has the capability of assigning courses to what specific training we need each student to have. We also like the fact that students are able to go with their portable devices and come out to the machine and see not only what ToolInMe has to offer and has the controls for a Haas controller by chance, or an Akuma or whatever's in there, and they have the machine on the floor, they can see that it's exactly the same thing. I have students every day that are on the floor using cell phones and tablets while they're at the machine as well. So for us, for being a blended learning where they're going to do some online, they're going to do some textbook, they're going to do some video, They also have curriculum packets and all the other stuff. It just makes it easier for us, like most people that are managing a large portion of their training as well as having to do lecture and lab time. It just makes it really easy for us to be able to move around and get that quality time with the students themselves.
Great, fantastic. Thanks for that, for Brett. Hey, just a quick follow-up question. So all of you are utilizing e-learning today in your courses. So one of the questions that has popped up is, what have been some of the challenges or barriers that you guys faced? If you guys could take like maybe a minute or two and just kind of expound upon some of the barriers you faced and how you overcame those. Troy, why don't you start out, please?
Sure. Okay. So with some of the barriers that I came up against first was, number one, convincing my administration that this was a legitimate tool to go forward with. And once my administration heard that my local industrial partner base was utilizing this in their training of their apprenticeships or their employees, it was hands down, no questions asked. So to be able to make that connection was huge. As far as other challenges, the challenges that we come up against are just the same challenges that any teacher would come up against with the students, like, well, I don't wanna. Well, here's why you shoulda. And once they get over that hump, it's like, oh, okay, this is easy. This is a walk in the park. So whereas what Brett just suggested that, they have electronic devices out in their lab, we don't have that, and so we have that all housed within our adjacent computer classroom. And that I can kind of see as a challenge or a barrier for being able to more fully integrate ToolInMe, but I see that how we're utilizing it and how we're moving forward is going to be kind of right in line with that. So that's just some of the quick challenges and barriers that we've had here at Roosevelt.
Great. Hey, Brett, how about yourself at Ogden?
Well, we implemented it such a long time ago. Our biggest problem back then was software issues. I mean, we implemented it when you had dial-up connection, which was a huge issue for a lot of people, unfortunately. Since then, we don't have those kind of issues, but our biggest ones were software. The computer, what tooling you had to offer was actually faster than the computers we had, so we had to do some upgrading there. Cost is always an issue, so we took the cost of ToolInMe, and we actually had taken some of our textbooks that we don't feel are value added to own as a machinist, and we rolled that into our tool crib where a student can check it out, and we rolled the cost that they were spending on the textbooks into the ToolInMe, so they have a more versatile thing that they can take with them when they leave. The textbooks that we were using, some of the textbooks are the same textbooks I used in '91 when I graduated the university in machining. It hasn't changed. It's got new pictures and new pages, but it's basically the same textbook. So we just kind of rolled that and determined that that wasn't a great thing for students to have, and that cost rolled back into ToolInMe. So we're able to do it that way a lot easier for us.
Great, thanks. Thanks, Brett. Appreciate that. And Kevin, how about from your perspective?
From the school point of view, guys, thankfully we didn't really have any real issues. Like I said, I think a little bit before, one of the issues I have or challenges I have noticed is definitely sometimes with the older students, because again, in the adult program, we could have an 18-year-old. I think last year I had a 63-year-old, wonderful man. But so some of the older students are a little, I think just the whole computer thing kind of can sometimes stress them out. So it's just very important at the beginning when you're introducing it to make sure, like no learning can take place if people are stressed out. So it's very important to kind of try to pinpoint those students, in that first day or 2 days, and just sit with them, one-on-one during lunch or before class, just to make sure that he or she is comfortable with the material. But like I said, those challenges usually with the older students, usually by the second week, that's kind of gone away. And I have a set of old textbooks in the shop, and that first week, if they get very anxious, I say, hey guys, we can always, you can always look in the textbook. But after the first week of ToolInMe, nobody looks at the textbook. So ToolInMe is working from that point of view.
Excellent. Thanks, Kevin. Appreciate that. Okay, so why don't we start with, so we're going to go and move on to question 2 here. And so how has this online approach benefited your program? So why don't we start out with Brett? Do you want to go first on this one?
Sure, that's fine.
Great.
I can tell you, I spent 10 years at our high school facility before I come to our main campus, so I actually have both different avenues of this. At our high school facility, we had some issues with some ESL-type students that were Spanish speaker primarily because of the demographics in our area, and ToolInMe was able to answer that question for me. I've had students that had disabilities where they can't, they need some accommodations, where ToolInMe reads it to you, where there's all kinds of note-taking, where I can change parameters inside of there to where allow them to take tests, time frames. The stuff that's there just makes it easier for me to organize and to develop the programs. It takes a lot of guesswork out of trying to get one started. One of the biggest things is the ability to set up with industry standards. So there's certifications that you can set up as well. And it's not something that we do here. We align everything to the national standards, but we don't require it based off our employers. It's not a necessity to them at this point, but it's good for me, and it gives me that warm, fuzzy feeling knowing that that's there. If they ever decide they want that, I don't have to spend a lot of time redeveloping the wheel. The wheel's already there.
Excellent. Thanks, Brett. Kevin, do you want to take this question here?
Sure. I suppose the main benefit, guys, is that I've seen over the 6 years is again the time in the shop. You know, I don't have to stand up there and give you know, an hour and a half lectures. The students have that material covered on their own, and because I think they can go back and review it because everybody learns at a different pace. When then we are in the shop, it's a lot more efficient because they know the answers to those questions. If I'm, you know, teaching CNC, I mean, they know the G codes, they know the M codes because of them obviously doing the lessons on ToolInMe. And so again, we're not spending time, you know, with me standing up at the front of the room just talking in relation to that. And that was a big, when I went back and got my degree in education, that was a big part of it to try to get away from that. And that's why I loved when I met ToolInMe when I started teaching. Because that additional time in the shop, that's really where our students want to be. It's definitely where I wanted to be all those years ago. So it really, really helps in relation to that. I think, again, you know, some people look at maybe online learning or something like that as a replacement for a teacher. Of course, it's very important to point out that that's not its purpose. Its purpose is it's a tool. Just like any other tool, it allows us to teach more efficiently and more effectively. And for that reason, it really, really does work. The kids get on board with it, and it's really, really helped the program over the last 5 years.
Excellent. Thanks for that, Kevin. Appreciate that. Troy, same question to you.
Yeah, thanks. With the variety of students that we are able to recruit and gain into our program, I have had students that are in the top of their class and students that are not necessarily in the bottom of their class, but you know, struggle academically. And so with the implementation of ToolInMe, it allows students to, as someone else has said, go ahead and replay or listen or have an idea. It's like, okay, I've taken this pre-test, and now I know what the class is coming and what it's going to be about. And so I take that pre-test knowing full well that it's just exposure to myself about what the material is. And then being able to have the student jump into the class and kind of have a heads up of, okay, this is where I'm going and this is what the objectives are and the outline. So I see that the biggest the biggest advantage for this with students is that it helps students of different abilities. different students of different capabilities as well. So I have some students in class currently that have IEPs or individualized educational plans. And so their IEPs state that, okay, I have extended time to do this, or I need a read aloud or something of that nature. And so with ToolInMe's different features and options, Brett mentioned the ESL, or that Spanish component. Fortunately, however, that students like that in my program yet, but if I do, I know that that's a way that I can still reach those particular students.
Okay, so we're going to head on to question 3 here. So one of the questions that we receive is, how does ToolIngyou, our product, the e-learning product, help with placement for your students? How do you collaborate with industry? Why don't we start with on that one? Let's go ahead and start with Kevin on that one.
Sure, guys. The collaboration with industry is very, very important, obviously, guys. Our high school students in general, like I said previously, go on to engineering college, but the adult program in general, 90% to 100% are planning to go straight into industry. And so one of the, when I started, or anybody starts in education, it can be a little frustrating in that there's so many words, or the same word for the same thing. But the reality, of course, we do the exact same thing in manufacturing. It's just that we've grown up with it, and so we get so used to it. And one of the big advantages when I place the students is that when the companies come back is the fact that they're familiar with the terminology. It seems kind of very basic, but it's really, really important, and ToolInMe does a great job of that in relation to the vocabulary at the beginning of the lessons. Or even job interviews. I set up this program called Linking Students to Industry 4 years ago, and I basically stole the idea from where I trained myself. And I invite the companies in around 3 months before the students graduate, and the students show the company the work that they've done, and you show them their ToolInMe results in relation to that if they choose. And again, that even during that interview, because again, they're going to be interviewed from people I know from industry, obviously from the shop floor, and so that's what they're going to be looking at. They're going to be asking the guys, do they know, the names of a manual mill? Do they know the names or the G codes or M codes for a CNC? So that terminology, and because of the linkage to ToolInMe, has been very, very useful. And indeed, when some of the companies saw that we were using ToolInMe, some of the companies have gone on and, talked to ToolInMe and got it an account for the company for people to use. So it's been very beneficial in placing students.
Excellent. Thanks, Kevin. Troy, can you tell us a little bit about the experiences that you've had?
Yeah, definitely. Mine are kind of opposite of what Kevin just explained there. My advisory board members, and those are members from local manufacturing sectors around, came to us and said, hey, we have ToolInMe. You having ToolInMe would be fantastic, because any class that your student completes and successfully takes, when they come to us either as an intern or as a new employee, can go ahead and count towards what they would do with us. And so that direct connection between what we're doing here on the secondary level with what they could get in either a post-secondary or a post-secondary option with an internship or an employment opportunity is huge that way. So our advisory board really came along beside us and said, yeah, this is phenomenal. Really spoke highly of ToolInMe and what they were able to develop. And then how that's developed further, we've had local conversations here with other manufacturing organizations that are trying to move the name of manufacturing forward for all manufacturers in the state, let alone in this local region. And so we're looking at a process now with a pre-apprenticeship type program. So even though one of our local industrial partners runs a apprenticeship program with all of their training that integrates ToolInMe, we can come along before that as a pre-apprenticeship site and then go ahead and have students work through ToolInMe classes and ToolInMe information and gain that, just as what Kevin just said, that experience, that knowledge, and equip them that much more so that when they do get to that apprenticeship level, they're running and they're up and running that much quicker.
Awesome. Thanks for that, Troy. And Brett, could you talk a little bit about the curriculum itself, more specific to the industry-driven?
Our industry is a lot like Troy, so we have an advisory board that evaluates our program once a year. They go through every nook and cranny of what we're doing. We like to tell everybody that what we do here is we are drivers of the ship. It is industry in our employer's program. We're just lucky enough to teach it. So with that in mind, a lot of what we do is based off what our employer's needs are. And where the ToolInMe has the NIM standard, has the NTMA, and has all the organizations, we're part of the Utah chapter of NTMA, so our alignment is fairly easy. And much like Troy, we have more of a stackable credential. So when we have our high school students in doing stuff here, and let's say they end up in an apprenticeship program somewhere, they're able to take what we have already completed in ToolInMe and just move it right into their apprenticeship. So it works both ways for us. We have not gone to the point where we have national credentials yet. Again, it gives me that warm fuzzy. The ability's there if they ever decide to flip the switch and I don't have to reinvent the wheel. But right now we don't have anybody that needs that in our area. We do have some students that are talking about becoming machinists in the military. And the military recently has required a NIM standard. So we are a test facility for that. However, I haven't had anybody to go through that to know how well the benefit will be. But when I've been across the country and I've talked to other people that have used ToolInMe to help credentialing, they said their students seem to be able to do whatever they need and be able to test the way they should be able to.
Excellent. Fantastic. Thanks for that, Brett. Kevin, I'd like to start with you on just kind of like a little bit of a follow-up question here. Could you give us maybe like kind of an example of how you've worked with industry to place some students or work with them back and forth, like maybe a real-world example? Don't necessarily need to name the company, but maybe a type of company that you worked with.
Sure. That program that we set up, linking students to industry, guys, here in South Florida, we have a lot of medical companies that obviously employ machinists. So, and the really cool thing, I just got an email from that same company today. We placed a student in his company 2 years ago. James was his name, and he's actually going on, and the company is actually helping him to go on and pay for his college. So James, in another 2 years, he'll be, in addition to be a machinist, he'll be a mechanical engineer, which is really cool when companies do that. And at the back of the classroom, a little bit of competition is always good. I have a big chart with all the students' names and the local companies, and it's really cool from the company's point of view, I think, when they come in, because, we have, like the other two guys were saying, we have 2 advisory meetings, and so it creates a little competition for the students and the companies, because when I visit the companies, I do joke with them. I says, I worked on the floor for 20 years, so I'll only recommend my students to a company that I would work for myself. But the medical company has been very helpful down here to us, as the aviation companies. South Florida, there's more manufacturing down here than I myself was aware of before I moved down here 12 years ago. In relation to what the other guys were saying about NIMS as well, NIMS and the mapping that ToolIngyou has to it has really, really helped the guys pass those certifications. And when we do have those, twice a year advisory meetings, it's great when the company can come in. They've hired a guy from our program, and they see the guy's name up on the wall with his NIMS credentials. I do joke with his students. It's a really great way, once they pass that, to maybe to ask for a little bit of a pay raise. Sometimes it works. Sometimes it doesn't in relation to that. The other thing is that, obviously, as a teacher, our focus is the student, basically, right? But we got to be honest as well. A lot of people, listening to this might be considering why to get into ToolInMe. But another good reason is there's no question our programs are judged as also on placements, which ToolInMe helps with, and certifications, which obviously definitely ToolInMe helps with as well.
Great, fantastic. Thanks for that. So here's what I want to do. I want to move on to kind of just, you know, the follow-up. The next question here that I want to kind of go on to is this. If you guys could expound a little bit, you know, we have a lot of instructors on here. We have a lot of people. Some might be using online training. Some might not be. You know, what's your message to them? You know, what's the message to parents? How do they convey that? So if we could kind of maybe move on to that question. And, you know, for this one here, why don't we go ahead and we'll start with Brett on this one.
I guess my best answer to a parent or to someone on that would be ToolInMe is developed by people that are writing curriculum every single day. So if you want something that is brand new every time you turn that on, I don't know, and I'm not seeing, there probably is something out there, but at least for machinist trade, I've not seen anything that has that ability. So I tell our students, if you see a video with an old machine, it may look old on that, but there's somewhere in this country someone is currently using that. I just can't keep up with what goes on in there. The way the exams are always changed, the way the curriculum's always changed, it's a brand new textbook every time you turn it on.
Great. Thanks for that, Brett. That's awesome. Troy, how about yourself?
One of the things that I would say to a new instructor that would be considering using this is what a value this is. What a value it is to have this online textbook not only in your back pocket, but also in a student's back pocket where they can access it from not only here at school, but also at home. Like I think it was Brett that was saying, they access it from out in the lab with their own personal devices. So having that value that it's always available, that's huge, no matter where they go. So being able to have students be able to go back through lessons and review lessons, like, okay, what was that part about the milling machine, or whatever that case might be. So as a new instructor, I would really encourage you to do not underestimate the value of what ToolInMe offers. And it's across the board with different credentials, because there's NIMS credentials, there's the rest of them are eluding me right now, I apologize, but that's the one that we're trying to focus on. Excuse me. So being able to know that. And then the second part would be being able to communicate that value to your students and being able to communicate that value to their parents. So again, I'm working with secondary students, juniors and seniors, and being able to explain to them, look, this isn't just something I'm making up. This isn't something that, you know, I'm just giving you as busy work. No, this is being used every day right now in industry, and the stuff that you're learning about within this test, within this class, within this curriculum on fill in the blank, it's being done right now today in our backyard here in our manufacturing environment. So just being able to encourage a new instructor to be able to look at that a little bit deeper and say, all right, this is something that's a whole drawer full of tools that I can add to my toolbox and be able to have this at my command.
Excellent. Thanks, Troy. Appreciate that. Kevin, what would your advice be to these instructors?
Rob, I think, like, for a new instructor, I was very lucky. It was here, I think, a year before I came, and Mr. Braz was great. So I would encourage a new instructor to talk to somebody like the other two guys, or me, or anybody else that they know that's doing it. It really does work. It helps the students. That's the main thing. But obviously, it also helps the teacher, which ultimately helps the student, right? In relation to how you grade, you know, putting in grades is just so user-friendly. in relation to sometimes, teacher planning day, I just see people putting in grades, and online and the way ToolInMe has it set up, it works basically. The other thing that I love about it from a new instructor's point of view, and I took full advantage of it, especially that first year, and it was just wonderful, was the customer service. You got 24 teenagers sitting in front of you, you got to be ready to go. And the customer service in ToolInMe is just wonderful. I mean, you call up, somebody answers, and somebody has an answer. And very often they have a better solution than the one I was even thinking about. I might be saying, oh, maybe we do this, and somebody there in the office says, no, Kevin, another teacher has done this. So there's a lot of resources out there for a new teacher. There's always a little bit of a learning curve, guys, but you should never let fear of the unknown stop you. It works. There's no question it works. And any teacher I've talked to, that I've encouraged to do this has come back and said, yeah, it works.
Excellent. Thanks, Kevin. So we're starting to get some really good questions that are coming in here. We're going to move on to the Q&A here in just a minute or two. So if you have some questions, why don't you go ahead and put them into the chats and into the chat there. So guys, one question that has popped up a couple of different times here is, how do you keep your students engaged with the program, given the fact that you're not doing the theory in the classroom? How do you keep them engaged to keep them moving forward? Why don't we start with, hey, Troy, why don't you just go ahead for that one, if you could start with that one.
Well, with the expectations that I explain to the students, I really try and hook them and try and make that connection that they already have with electronic learning, with that computer screen. For us, with high school students, it's always a challenge. It's like, okay, no, it's time to put your phone away. Type thing. So they already have that connection. So they aren't afraid, like I believe Kevin mentioned, to go ahead and make that connection with online learning or online type of things that way. So that's how I try and bring it back in that way, is to make that connection. It's like, okay, this is not a textbook. I use it like a textbook, but it's not. So it's going to be a lot more engaging. It's going to be a lot more exciting for the students to be able to grab hold of it and use it. And like I already mentioned in the previous question, that they can use it at home. They can use it, when they're waiting to, go someplace or something of that nature on their own personal device or phone. They can just log into their account and continue to go from there. So then the other thing I do is I for every ToolInMe class that I assign, obviously it's for a grade. And so with the way I have my classes set up, they have multiple chances to retake the post-test, and the best score that they obviously are able to get, that's the one that goes into my grade book, and being able to go from there. So it's a success-based type of system that way that ToolInMe is set up to use. Or to be able to implement that way into a new teacher's curriculum. And so I really like it that way. So again, just to recap quickly, it's setting my expectations up in front of the students and saying, this is how it's going to work, this is how we use it, this is how it gets used outside of these four walls in industry. So that's how I set my expectations.
Great. Fantastic. Thanks for that. Hey, Brett, how about yourself? You could just take like a minute or two and just kind of expound on that as well.
Where we're a competency-based environment, we use ToolInMe to help a student learn. Just like anything else, we don't believe as a machinist, yes, theory is part of what you need to know, but we always, hands-on is how you're going to learn as well. So anything that we do, we don't have any theory. Our program is about 70-30. 30% is theory, 70% is actually hands-on. So to keep someone motivated, we've developed it in what they call just-in-time learning. They need to know specific things to be able to build the project. It makes it a little easier to keep the student that wants to be a machinist engaged and on track.
Excellent. Thanks, Brett. That's fantastic. Kevin, how about you? About a minute on that?
I pretty much borrowed an old trick from one of my teachers years ago. most of us, like the other two guys were saying, most of us want to be in the shop. So obviously, part of the engagement is if you don't have your tooling used done, you won't be in the shop, and that usually helps a lot of that. The other thing, just like Troy said, obviously grades. Kids, especially the high school kids, are very motivated by their grades, and I have due dates, just like in industry. So if you miss your due date, you get a 0. You still have to do the work because you still have to know the knowledge to be in the shop. And, of course, bribery always helps. So I have a pizza party. If a class can go a full quarter without ever getting a due date, missing a deadline, we can have some pizza. That usually helps as well.
Fantastic. A little bribery can go a long way. Okay, thanks, gentlemen. Okay, so we're going to kind of jump into the Q&A. We've got some good questions here. I'm going to kind of ask them, and I might not ask all three of you to expound upon it, but I'll kind of choose one of you here. So one of the first questions that came in here was from Roger Snow. The question is, how do you maintain the balance between the time students spend on ToolInMe and the time they spend in the lab with hands-on application and practice of these skills? Related to that, what is the percentage of time they spend in class in each of the activities? Example, 50% ToolInMe, 50% in the machines. Brett, how about yourself?
The way we address it is we have syllabuses. Our syllabus is we tell our students it's like a roadmap. You're going to read this chapter, do this ToolInMe, watch this video, and then go build this project. So we have it kind of developed so that a student can work at their own pace through the program. And again, we try to keep it between 75% hands-on experience to 30% technical education.
Great, fantastic, thank you. Hey, Troy, how about yourself? Could you expound upon that one?
Well, I wish I could say that I was as dialed in as what Brett and his program are, but I'm not. So that's given me a great idea, Brett, so thanks. As far as the application of the split time between ToolInMe and lab or other curriculum type stuff we're doing, I'm probably at about 25 to 30% ToolInMe time, and then 75 to 80% of lab time that way. So being able to balance it. Probably pretty obviously, like I've just explained, pretty heavily driven with projects. So I've got students out in the labs, got students working on 3D printing, on 3D solid modeling, and those types of things. So that kind of helps keep it all roped together and being able to make the connections that way too. Not sure if I answered all of that part of that question for you, Rob. So if there's something I missed, let me know.
No, I think you definitely did there. And Kevin, so I'm getting a couple people ask a very similar question here, so I'm just going to kind of just condense it here. How do I know what classes to choose for my students? So if you're doing like a CNC program or like a machining program, how do I know what classes that they should take?
Yeah, that's there's kind of, well, many different teachers might have different ways of answering that question, guys. If you're from the industry and have worked many years in the industry, you could go in and obviously view and ToolInMe, you have it broken down. You can filter, so you could go in if it was a CNC class. You could filter the classes, you can review the classes yourself and pick them yourself as the instructor if you feel comfortable doing that. But the other thing, of course, that ToolInMe has, which is wonderful, is that it has mapping. So you can go and contact ToolInMe and they will show you that mapping thing. I remember when I came first using that, calling the EAR offices, and the ladies there showed me how to do that. So the teacher could do it. You could do the mapping, or the other way, of course, is we all have advisory committee meetings, and you can also run it by the members of the advisory board. So there's many different ways of doing that, but it's because, again, the amount of content that ToolInMe has, it makes it very, 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 very effective to do that and to get the students to know the material they need to know to get that job. First job usually.
Great, thanks, Kevin. Appreciate that. And we had another question come in from Greg. Do you make the ToolInMe, the pre and the post assessments, are those mandatory as part of your programs? And, how much weight do you put on those that they impact the students' overall grades? Troy, why don't you start off with that one?
Sure, yeah. So as far as the making the pre and post test mandatory, I do. I think the pre-test is an excellent way to get the students' brain in the right wavelength of what they're going to be learning about, what they're going to be taking a look at. And I tell them, yes, do the pre-test. The other really cool thing that I like that ToolInMe is able to do, and I don't know if there's other instructors that are currently using ToolInMe right now that aren't presenters, but one of the things that I really like is the fact that there are these interactive lessons. There are interactive things that are embedded within each class. And I'm saying to the students, yes, don't skip over those. Make sure you watch those. Make sure you are active and engaged in those types of things too, because it really helps improve the students' understanding and comprehension of that. And then as far as the post-test goes, yeah, absolutely. That's how I'm able to base their grade, is through that post-test. And again, like I believe Kevin said, there are deadlines for them. So if they don't get it done, yeah, it's a 0. So that hopefully should answer Greg's question on that.
Yeah, I think it does. And Brett, how about 30 seconds from you on that same question?
We're a little bit different. What we do here at the college is a competency-based environment. So yes, we have that. Yes, students have to do the pre-test and the post-tests and all the assignments. Those are all emailed to a specific account so all my instructors can find it to be able to sign off the progress for it. But we don't use testing as a tool for grading. We use it to help them learn more than to assess what they know. We believe that all the assessment should be on the projects themselves. Theory is theory, but practical application still is where it needs to be.
Great, fantastic. And Kevin, how about yourself?
In relation to the post and the thing, that's one of the things, guys, I actually like about ToolInMe. I remember I showed it to it was the vice principal or something in relation to the educational component of it more so. Actually, we set up this thing called Math in Machining, and it was actually the math teacher. The fact that it's set up with that pre-post kind of concept that educators are very, very familiar with. And so I do require them to do I don't obviously grade the pre, but the post is definitely part of their grade. The pre definitely helps them, and like one of the guys was saying, there is interactive parts within the ToolInMe that it's very important for the students to do as well. And the students, the students who spend the time, from a teacher's point of view, students don't know that, especially at the beginning. Obviously, you see when the student has logged in and how long he or she has logged in. And so it can be very useful in relation to that to make sure that they're actually learning the material and not just going through it. And like I think Brad was saying, yeah, you see that then on the shop floor, because like any trade program, it's ultimately can you fix the car, can you machine the part, can you bake the cake? That's really what it ultimately comes down to.
Excellent. Thanks, Kevin. Appreciate that. Well, we're beginning to run out of time here. We're actually bumping up against time here, and I want to be cognizant of everybody's time out there to get back to what they're doing to get to their day. Thank you, everybody, for joining. A really big thank you, Brett, Kevin, Troy. Thank you so much for agreeing to do this and getting on here and helping everybody understand e-learning and how to optimize that to give yourself more time for more hands-on learning. So just a quick follow-up here. As I mentioned in the beginning, if you want to see this webinar again, we've covered an enormous amount of information. It's going to be available on our ToolInMe U-SME YouTube page. It'll be there on Friday. You're also going to receive an email that's going to have a link to that as well, to the link. And again, if you are looking to, if you need some more information, you want to get a demonstration, and you want to actually use this live, we can actually give you a free, no-charge demo account to the product. Feel free to reach out to myself, and I will get you in touch with someone who can help you with that. Again, thank you very much for attending our session today, and I am going to turn this over to Courtney.
All right. On behalf of ToolIngyou, I would like to thank you all for joining us today and for your participation. I'd like to also thank our speakers for their excellent presentation. At this point, I will alert the attendees to the survey that I will soon be bringing up on your screens. We do ask that you take a moment to fill out this survey, as it does help us in planning for future presentations. This concludes today's session. To disconnect, simply hang up and exit out of your browser windows.